This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. We begin with K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor joining us for our cattle market update. He highlights the KSU-beef replacements decision aid tool made readily available through AgManager.info and reviews the latest data from the January meat demand monitor. We are also joined by K-State agricultural economist Reid for a preview of the upcoming Women Managing the Farm Conference. She shares the history of the nearly 20-year-old event, highlights keynote speakers such as Brandi Buzzard, and encourages listeners that there is something for everyone. We end with this week's wildlife segment where K-State fisheries and aquatics specialist Joe Gerken shares insight on the 80-pound catfish that was recently caught in the Kansas River. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are starting this week's programming with our cattle market update for the week. And for that, we are joined by Glynn Tonsor, K-State livestock economist. So, Glynn, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Samantha.
Absolutely. Let's start with our cash cattle markets. What did they really show in the last week?
Yeah, so through Thursday, USDA AMS called the markets flat to up a little bit, depending on which market I quote, 154 to 156. We're still in the mid-150s for a little while here now. For feeder cattle, I like to quote the Pratt market. So, again, most cases were flat, depending on what weight class I would bring to you. Two specific lots. One was 67 head, weighing 627 pounds, went for $199, so just under $2. That'd be down a bit compared to earlier. 109 head, weighing 872, came in at $176. It's important to contrast that with the board. So, CME's nearby contracts. For live cattle, February contract on Thursday was right at $160, just barely under, up about $3 from the Thursday before. And then the nearby March feeder cattle contract was $186, also up about $3. So a little more strength on the board than there was in the cash markets this past week.
Absolutely. And as we think through our other markets, our box beef cutout as of late, what has it shown?
So the choice box beef, Thursday's close was $265, down about $4 from the Thursday before. Select came in at $253, up about $2. So again, a mixed bag. Not a lot of major movement there. A lot of chatter about, meat building up in the cold storage space and so forth. I'm not maybe quite as bearish on that as some are, but that's definitely worth monitoring in the broader wholesale meat, not just beef, but wholesale meat space.
Sure. And we've already chatted through the cattle on feed inventory report that came out this month, but just to hit on it again, if listeners missed those previous conversations, let's talk through those numbers.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to highlight was the Kansas specific points, and basically as a segue to a decision tool here at AgManager. But the Kansas beef cow number, or the estimate more narrowly that USDA NASS put out, put the Kansas beef cow herd at about 1.3 million head here as of January of 23, down 7.5% from the year before. I'm noting this because there's 7 states that USDA estimates have over 1 million beef cows. Kansas is one of those. And on a percentage basis, Kansas had the largest pullback. And I find that interesting. Kansas is not the only one that's had a drought by any means. There's probably more to it than just a drought. But Kansas is one of the states that had multiple months and a sizable share of the state, not just a couple of counties. Our industry as a whole was adjusting. So that's worth noting. There's a lot of implications of that we could talk about. We're going to probably import even more feeder cattle, all that kind of stuff. But I bring it up not just because I'm wearing a purple shirt and we're sitting on purple campus here, but our AgManager.info website has a resource. So most of your listeners probably know or remember Dr. Kevin Duvetter, used to be in our department. He originally built an Excel tool that's called KSU-beef replacements. It's an economic resource to use to value, and specifically the net present value, of what you could pay for a replacement into your herd. That's timely, not because I think everybody's going to expand the herd next week, but again, take the Kansas number. I anticipate the herd in Kansas will build back. I don't know that it'll go back to the old highs. Don't go that far, but I do think we'll add females back to the herd when Mother Nature allows it and as profitability resumes. Profitability is projected to occur over the next couple of years, so that part might occur, to be determined if Mother Nature supports that. But I wrote down one specific number in this tool to kind of motivate and bait people to go use it. If you use USDA's project prices for the next 10 years, if you use the case of a $900 cost, cash cost to run a cow for the year, and you plug in 8% discount rate, and those are the defaults in the tool that I just updated while I'm sharing them. If you buy or retain your own heifer here in 2023 and expect to have the first calf to sell from her in 2024, if you expect to get 6 calves, which is a rough estimate, 5 to 8 is the number depending on who you talk to. If you think you get 6 calves of production, the net present value in that story is $1,332. The way you interpret that number is you could pay $1,332 for that female if you expect to get exactly those USD prices, your cost for that, and if you're quote-unquote okay with an 8% return. Conversely, if somebody's in the exact same situation, but they have more favorable cost structure, so if they can run that cow for $775, so $125 a year less than the base scenario I just talked through, the net present value in that case is $1,778. So a full $400 and almost $50 more higher value for that animal. I'm highlighting it just to illustrate having lower cost is really important. And it illustrates who's going to, quote unquote, win the bidding wars as we start rebuilding the herd. Operations that have lower cost structure or accept a lower discount rate or are more optimistic about calf prices, or obviously any combination of those three, are the ones that are going to be positioned to pay more. And this tool quantifies that. But you can use this resource to say what, quote unquote, should I be paying if I'm targeting a certain rate of return and I know my cost. You can go in and you can add or subtract from the calf prices that are projected and so forth. So my main point here today is to remind people that decision tools on Ag Manager, it's been there for quite some time. I just updated it this past week, and it seems timely given the broader discussion about the herd size.
Sure. Yeah. Just letting producers know that there's tools out there to help them make these decisions, and they're available on Ag Manager. So once again, that's the KSU-Beef Replacements Decision Aid tool, which can be found on AgManager.info. So, Glynn, I know you have some other things coming up. I think Cattlemen's Day is one of the hot button areas that you'll be talking at, right? It
is, and it's, that's on our notes here just to, remind people to come join us. We're sitting just a couple hundred feet from where that'll be here, basically a month from now. I'm sure, going to be talking about the herd, right, as part of my broader outlook discussion, the Q&A. More generally, come attend, make use of the Ag Manager resources. Hopefully what we do here at K-State is helpful for you.
And as always, whenever you join us, you like to highlight the latest from the Meat Demand Monitor. So what did January really show from that?
Yeah, so just 2 days ago, the January report was posted. Some better news than we've had for a couple months here. So both retail, so think grocery store for at home, as well as food service, away from home demand, we saw improvement compared to December. Specifically, 6 of the 8 categories I track had stronger demand than in the month of December. For grocery store demand, it was only shrimp and plant-based patties that were down. So both beef and both pork and the chicken breasts that we track were up compared to December. When we look over to food service, plant-based patty again was down compared to December, but so was pork chop demand. So the 2 beef and the baby back ribs is the other pork one that we track, and chicken breast meal again, we're all up. There's a little bit of an uptick in optimism among consumers. I'm not going to tell you we're out of the woods by any means, but I think there's less pessimistic signals is probably the more accurate way to say that as we went through the month of January. Inflation expectations are easing is a component of that. You and I are sitting here staring at an ugly figure I've built. In audio world, people can't see this, but if you follow me on Twitter or whatever, you can see some of these figures or pull up the actual report that's on Ag Manager. But we're looking at a bar chart here that is summarizing expectations of what consumers think meat prices, specifically grocery store beef and pork prices, next month will be. And residents in the U.S. continue to expect higher retail meat prices, but the magnitude of increase is actually the lowest this past month we've had since all the way back to May of 21. And I just threw a lot of info at the listeners, so I'll back up and kind of repeat it, is the public's still expecting higher meat prices next month, but the magnitude of increase is the smallest we've had since May of 2021. And to me, that aligns with moderating inflation through the whole economy. Inflation's still historically high, but it's not 8-9% like we had at one point. And I think consumers are passing that on in the form of their expectations for higher meat prices. That would be good. In many ways, there's a lot of discussion around this, but lower meat prices itself isn't necessarily good if it's because demand has slipped. Right. So we got to think through this. If it's an affordability issue, that's different. If it's a product quality issue, that's different. The reason a price comes down is really important. But what this just tells us is consumers are getting more optimistic that the asking price of the grocery shelf will be going up slower than it has been in the past. Sure.
And like you mentioned, inflation rates, they're still increasing, but not at rapid speeds as they were, right?
Correct. So, you and I mainly talk things in the ag and even more narrowly meat and livestock space. Even in that space, retail meat prices are declined compared to historic highs. Fuel's coming up a little bit, but it's not as high as it was. I mean, it depends on what category in our economy we talk about, but inflation is still a hot topic thing. Federal Reserve's still raising rates to deal with it. There's lots of, we could decouple there, but consumers are a little bit less concerned about that than they were, I'd say, Q4 of 2022.
Absolutely. It'd be interesting if you included info on eggs in this. It'd be maybe a little bit different of a story.
It would be, but even there, we have to remember eggs is an ingredient in so many things. People think about what they do with the carton of dozen eggs you take at home, and I fully am cognizant of the higher price that's there, but they are an ingredient in so many things that it has an impact on food price in different places that people think through. But at the same time, eggs are still a pretty cheap thing compared to a lot of other things in our basket.
For sure.
So percentage change-wise, yeah, it's a lot higher, and I'm not trying to dismiss the issue, but I do encourage people to have some context on, for the average person in the U.S., food is still affordable, and as a percentage of our expenditures, food is lower than most, and eggs is a small portion of that as well. So some context is important.
And you wanted to touch on one final thing from the Meat Demand Monitor, kind of comparing generational differences, I guess, in consumption habits, right?
Yeah, so, we're doing this by audio. Your listeners don't know this, but I'm going to, reveal you're younger than I am, so there's a generational component to this. Your listeners probably know that. But what you're alluding to here is we asked now in the MDM, how many eating occasions, so meals and snacks, did you have yesterday? And then we tallied that up by generation. And 3 eating occasions is still the most common number. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner would be the traditional thing you'd answer there. But there's more people, regardless of their age, that eat 4 or more times a day than there are that eat less than 3. So if you don't eat the traditional 3, you're more likely to have an additional snack, is the way to interpret that, as opposed to skipping a meal. That pattern is strongest for younger generations, which is why I was alluding to you there on the difference. So, millennials and Gen Z, so those have been born since 1981, are much more likely to say they have 4 or 5 or even 6, the way we track this, eating occasions, than somebody's like Gen X or Baby Boomer, so they were 1980 or older birth date. The implications of that from the meat industry are, particularly among younger generations, I think portion size, product convenience are elevated in importance. And looking forward, not just sitting here in February 23, but think the next decade, couple decades, as those younger generations gain buying power and disproportionately become the main consumer in the U.S., and the millennials already are, but even more so in decades ahead, I think things like convenience and portion size, because of the difference in number of eating occasions, will be even more important for the broader protein industry to monitor, hence the term Meat Demand Monitor.
Well, thanks so much, Glenn, for joining us today and for this fun conversation for our cattle market update.
Thanks for having me on, Samantha.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor joining us for this week's cattle market update. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by K-State agricultural economist Robin Reid. She's joining us for a conversation to preview the upcoming Women Managing the Farm conference. So, Robin, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Samantha.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. And this is a conference that actually has quite a bit of history when we think about nearly 20 years of it now.
Yes, history long before my time with K-State Research and Extension, but this was started, like you said, nearly 20 years ago as more smaller meetings basically geared towards women landowners and, some difficulties that surround that situation. And as it grew, then it became one statewide conference down in Wichita for a number of years, and then has moved here to Manhattan. And ever since, we've been having a pretty large conference every year here in Manhattan, Kansas for women managing the farm.
Yeah, we'll talk more about registering and things like that later on, but nearly 200 women already registered for this event.
Yes, so it is a big conference, and, the beauty of having it here in Manhattan, we have a very large conference center, and we have a lot of different abilities to do multiple breakout sessions and different events at Women Managing the Farm to cater to any kind of person that is involved in agriculture, either that on the farm, agricultural business, or just, somehow connected to agriculture. There's really something for everyone at this conference. And I know that sounds cliche, but it is actually true. It is amazing all the different topics that this conference is able to provide.
Awesome. Well, let's start first and foremost with our keynote speakers that we're going to have at this event. I'm attending this year, so I'm really excited to be there, and I'm excited about some of these keynote speakers.
Yeah, so I'll start out with Brandi Buzzard. She's going to be kicking our conference off. Dates again, February 16th and 17th would be the normal conference, pre-conference on the 15th. But Brandi is a Kansas native here, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of her, but she's a cowgirl, rancher, working mom, and wife, and has quite the resume of different places that she has spoke on, including Fox, CBS, Weather Channel, Newsy. She was actually named the NCBA Masters of Beef Advocacy Advocate of the Year. So she has a lot of good credentials. But really, when we wanted to invite her to this conference, we just knew she would connect well and really inspire this audience. So her keynote is going to be small talk, meaningful conversations. And really what she's going to be talking about is how to lay the groundwork for meaningful conversations with people outside of agriculture.
Well, Brandi will do an excellent job covering that. Looking forward to hearing her speak. And you mentioned those pre-conference workshops a bit there, too. That's going to be taking place the 14th and 15th, right?
Yeah, maybe we should back up and cover that as well. So the way we structure this conference, it's like all day on Thursday and then Friday till 2 o'clock. But on Wednesday, we offer pre-conference sessions, and those are longer, more specialized topics that we really go in depth on. So the really popular one we've been doing for quite a while is QuickBooks. We have an introduction one in the morning, which unfortunately is full at this time. But in the afternoon, we have an advanced QuickBooks session from 1:30 to 4:30. And so it's very limited on participants, but you're actually sitting at a computer learning the different techniques with the QuickBooks software. So we do have a couple spots in that one left. The other two this year is an interactive farm safety workshop, and this is going to be down at CanEquip in Wamego. So we're actually going to be out there looking at equipment and talking about different aspects of farm safety and even some maintenance things. The other one that we have that I'm very excited about is the future of drones on the farm. So drone technology, I know you've interviewed some of our specialists here on campus and what they've been doing with drones, but we're really focusing this session on how drones can be used right now on a farm or ranch and the different technologies that are available and what they can do. So again, this is a pre-conference session on Wednesday the 15th from 1:30 to 4:30. But I think it's going to be a really great one as well.
Wonderful. Well, I know that you mentioned breakout sessions being a big part of this conference. So let's talk through some of those breakout opportunities.
Sure. So a unique thing we're doing this year that I'm also very excited. Can you tell there's a lot of excitement going on with this? We were able to get AJ Tarpoff, who is a extension beef veterinarian here with K-State Research and Extension. He's going to be doing a calving school at the conference. So we've never done this before, but he's traveled the state and is always really popular wherever he has one of these calving schools. But that's where there's a real demonstration of life-size cow, and he shows different techniques of manipulating that calf to assist in calving, and just a lot of information surrounding that. And I know it's going to be extremely popular at the conference to have him do that for this group. We also, along with that session, if cattle are not part of the operation, we have a crop marketing workshop going on, and our own Lavelle Windsor is going to be leading that workshop. And then we also have a program at the same time with diversification through specialty crops. So hopefully this gives a range of different breakouts that anybody can attend. And the specialty crop one too, I think is going to be really great, talking about all the different things that you can do, high tunnels, different crops that can help diversify. So that's like our biggest breakout session. But then we have 4 more after that. And there is just a huge wide range of topics, farm succession planning, identifying weeds. There's going to be some sessions looking at crop insurance, soil health, cooperatives' role in the rural community, livestock risk protection, agritourism, dealing with the drought, financing a farm and ranch operation. The list goes on. So at each of our breakout sessions, there's actually 6 different options that attendees can choose from. And some of those repeat, so you don't have to miss one if there's 2 going on that you really want to go to. But yeah, it is a conference that has a little bit of everything to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that there's something for everyone. And as you're going through that list, I'm thinking, I want to go to all of these. These all sound so incredible.
Well, and yet, unfortunately, we do get that feedback that, there were so many great sessions and I couldn't make it to them all. But my response is, we'll come again next year.
Yeah.
We do rotate through a lot of different topics and speakers, but there's typically, there's opportunities to catch it the following year, hopefully, if you miss it.
Awesome. Well, I know that these conferences obviously are generated to help spread knowledge, and that's a huge part of them. But the networking opportunity with fellow, women in agriculture across the state is something that should not be missed out on as well.
Absolutely. And we really strive to create an environment conducive to that. So one of the things that we do at this conference every year is having networking roundtables. So we have different groups that each attendee can identify with: agricultural partners, independent producers, absentee landowners, industry career women, business managers, and even homefront heroes or women with family in the military. And we have an hour of the conference blocked off where we have trained facilitators that lead a discussion with each of these networking groups. And the idea is to kind of share common struggles and victories and just relate to each other within that networking group, but also to meet people when you're at this conference, because we do have people mostly from Kansas, but Missouri, Nebraska, even further than that come to attend this conference every year. But we really try to create an environment where you can meet other women that are in a similar situation to yourself and hopefully get to know them throughout the 2 days.
Absolutely. Wonderful opportunity for sure. And as people are listening and they're thinking, well, I know someone that should either attend this or I myself want to. I know registration is still open.
Yeah, so the conference itself is coming up pretty quick. Again, February 15th, 16th, and 17th. So we really highly encourage for people to get signed up as soon as possible. Easiest way is to go on our website, womenmanagingthefarm.com, or if you just want to Google search Women Managing the Farm. Again, it's the conference here in Manhattan, Kansas.
I think I was speaking with Tanya Ackerman from the FSA earlier this month, and she was mentioning that there's a student discount as well for students that are interested in attending.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. So this is the first year we're actually offering that. Being here next to Kansas State University, we really encourage students also to attend. So they have a reduced registration fee of $60 to attend the entire conference.
Robin, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a bit about it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State agricultural economist Robin Reid joining us to talk about the Women Managing the Farm Conference coming up on February 15th through the 17th. Before we cut to a short break, I just wanted to plug for another great event that is coming through K-State Research and Extension. KSRE will be hosting an online agronomy series called Crop Talk. It's slated to begin Tuesday, February 7th through Tuesday, February 28th, and will highlight several important topics for crop producers. These will be on Tuesdays, and each session will be held from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. Planned topics of discussion include spring annual forages to fill the gap in cattle feed, climate-smart agriculture, alternative weed control research, and corn tillers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There will also be a time for questions between Kansas crop producers as well as K-State Extension specialists at each of the sessions. You can register online now at www.northwest.ksu.edu/events. Or you can call the Cottonwood Extension Office in Hayes. The number to reach them is 785-628-9430. Once you register, a link to the online sessions will be emailed to you. Again, that website to register at is www.northwest.ksu.edu/events. Or, again, you can call the Cottonwood Extension Office in Hayes at their phone number, which is 785-628-9430. Along with all of the links we just discussed and the phone numbers you can call, we'll also link to this program in the show notes of today's show, which can be found on agtoday.net. We hope you can join us all for Crop Talks every Tuesday in February, beginning at 12 noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. Again, we're cutting to a short break, but when we return, we'll round out today's show with this week's wildlife segment with K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Specialist Joe Gerken. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by Joe Gerken. He is our K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Specialist for this week's Wildlife Update. So, Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, today you've been getting lots of questions lately because of an 80-pound catfish that was recently caught in the Kansas River. So, catfish is the name of the game today.
That's right. So, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Fishery Division was out sampling for some invasive species a couple weeks ago, and they caught an 80-pound catfish, a blue catfish, in the Kansas River. And so they put that on social media. It's been getting a lot of buzz, and I've been getting lots of questions about it. So I thought we would chat about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure one of the first questions you get whenever you're talking about this is it common for catfish in this area to get that big?
Yeah, so the first question I get is what bait were they using, right? So people want to know how they can go catch one. And we'll talk about the bait in a second, but how big they get, I think the state record is just shy of 103 pounds on the Missouri River for a blue catfish. 80 pounds to 100 pounds in some of the reservoirs we have around here are fairly not common, but they're not irregular either. So the getting that big is kind of something that these fish do. And so they're growing up all their lives, getting big, and so we want to know how to catch them.
Yeah, and that growth depends mostly on the size of their environment, right?
Sure. So fish have something called indeterminate growth, which means they're going to keep growing their entire lives. So if we think about you or me, we get to 6 feet tall or something and we stop growing, right? But fish keep growing depending on their habitat. So if we have them in a little aquarium, you think about a goldfish, for example, it's only going to get to be a couple inches long. If we take that same goldfish and throw it out in a big pond, it can grow up to be a foot or 2 feet long. So they can keep growing to match their habitat.
Cool term there to add to people's vocabulary, indeterminate growth. Great.
Yep.
So you mentioned bait earlier, that being the first question, really. What bait was used in this case? So what happened? What's the story of this fish?
Sure. So everyone wants to know, what bait were they using? The answer is they were probably cheating a little bit. So they were doing scientific research. I imagine they were using gill nets or trammel nets, which are nets that the fish swim into and they get tangled up. And so this time of year, the water's cold. They can untangle them and let them go, which this catfish, it's important to mention, was released unharmed. So they were cheating, but the bait you could use would be fresh cut bait. So other fish that have been caught and chopped into pieces can be used, or you can use live, smaller fish. So flathead catfish like live fish, blue catfish generally are caught on that fresh bait.
Awesome. So some advice there for those that are looking for a catfish this big of their own. I know that we were talking about age and growth of these fish. So how old do you think this fish really was?
It's hard to say for sure. To be really sure, you'd have to kill the fish. There's a little bone called an otolith in their head that has rings on it, and just like a tree would have rings on it. And you can count those growth rings and get an idea. You can also use one of the spines on their pectoral fins, a fin on the side of a catfish, and you can do similar things. But there's some constraints to that, some problems you can run into. So it's hard to say for sure. But if we look at growth rates, we look at a common age for a fish this size, probably about 25 years old. So that fish has been out there swimming around for quite a while.
Yeah, that's incredible. Same age as me now.
Look at that. Yeah, happy birthday just a week or so ago.
Yeah, thank you. So when it comes to fish that are caught and they're this large, are there any concerns when we're thinking about potentially consuming them?
Yeah, so KDHE, Kansas Department of Health and Environment, releases an advisory every year. I think they just released that, actually talking about some of the concerns you might have. Some heavy metals bioaccumulate, so older fish tend to have more of those than younger fish. In general, younger fish are better to eat. The meat tastes better. It has a better texture, and it's better for ecology if you let the big fish go and you keep the small fish to eat. So you can eat a big fish. I would recommend, for many reasons, that you focus on the smaller fish. So a catfish, if you can catch a 5 or 10 pound catfish, that's about ideal for eating size.
Sure, just not as cool as being able to say that you caught an 80-pound one.
Well, not quite as cool, but still pretty neat. It's fun to catch them, right?
Absolutely. So, Joe, as we round out today's program on catfish, are there any other resources for listeners if they're looking to learn more?
Yeah, so as always, start with your local agent. So if you have questions about fish, reach out to your local Natural Resources Extension agent. I'm always available if you'd like to ask me questions. I get to talking too much about fish. I get excited about it, so definitely reach out. Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks has a lot of resources. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would also be great to look at for resources, so lots of options out there.
Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation today, and happy fishing to those of you that are embarking on your own, hopefully, 80-pound catfish journey.
Yeah, let us know.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Specialist Joe Gerken joining us for this week's Wildlife Update. That concludes today's programming. We'll be back with more tomorrow on Agriculture Today.